Welcome to the Small Scape. Just got back from Aquashella Daytona 2023, and for me, it was kind of a tough Aquashella, I'm not gonna lie. I'm curious what your thoughts are of the aquariums that I'm going to show you and my thoughts to go along with it. If you want to see more aquariums that were featured at that show, I highly recommend that you check out Primetime Aquatics. He did a little bit more elaborate of more tanks, but this one, you know what, I really was not prepared to see some of these tanks, and one of them I actually had to walk away from. I'm not lying. I thought it would be fun to categorize the different scapes that I saw into what it's focused on, and then you can see which scapes speak to you. The first category is rocks. So I really think it's important to find your style. What speaks to you, even though you may switch between different styles, you're not really quite sure, but it really is very helpful when you want to create something that you love. This one is a really great example. And this is something that nobody would have seen coming, combining two different rocks like this. I don't know if you like it. If it's maybe not your style, I'd be curious if you do like it. But this proves that, especially with this aquascaping contest, all of the aquascapers had the exact same aquascaping supplies. Some choices, not that many different choices, and everybody comes up with something totally different. I love things that are not your typical. This is a very cool look, but if you don't want any plants and you want all rock, totally an option. And for cichlids who are going to eat your plants, this is a great choice. And of course, everybody would scape something different with these supplies. Who knows what you would come up with? This tank really spoke to me, and you'll see why in a little bit. It cracked me up because this is from Shelby from the Garden of Eder, and I really do think that we have a lot in common. She's kind of like my spirit animal, because we'll talk sometimes and I'll say, oh my gosh, I thought of that same thing. We are on the same wavelength, and this with that painted backdrop, I absolutely love. And I had to include this because a few years ago, I think it was on Primetime's channel. I don't know why Mr. Primetime let me do this tank, but I had to include this a few years ago because I did the same thing. Now, of course, my backdrop is not like Shelby's. It's kind of like maybe like a first grader did it, totally fine. But you can take inspiration from anything and make it your own. If you have a smaller tank, a bigger tank, less supplies, more supplies. Now, if you like driftwood and you want to focus all your eyes on driftwood, here are some tanks that will probably speak to you, and you can use elements of this in creating something for yourself. I just love Jen's style. It speaks to me, and it just says whoever's in there is absolutely going to love it. It's so peaceful. It almost is simple, even though you know that it's going to take a lot to create something like that. You need to have some skills. But if you look at it, there's not a whole lot of rock. There are some plants along the bottom, but it's mostly driftwood. It's the same kind of driftwood repeated throughout the tank. So fun. This is her other tank. Absolutely love this as well. It's her style that really speaks to me. I always love it. And if you love driftwood too, there you go. Take a look at her tanks. Now, if we're talking a piece of driftwood, that's totally taking up the centerpiece of a tank. I have to include Mr. Primetime's tank, and this was done with the help of Jimmy Gimbel, who's the best, and he allowed Mr. Primetime to pick that piece of driftwood, and boy, was he proud of himself. He even attempted to get me to fix some of my driftwood in my tank because now he's an aquascaper. But little shout out to Jason. He did an excellent job. It was really fun to see him playing with aquascaping supplies and just really having a ball. And in Primetime's video, he's going to also include why you don't want to use that driftwood. If you prefer tanks that really focus on the plants, I had to include Charles here because he says that he is a plant guy, and I can see it. And there was a very specific area. This area right here, I told Charles I loved it because you're kind of peeking through that Java fern to see the, what is that, Ludwigii in the back. And I just loved having kind of like a little surprise looking through the little areas and finding cool plants. This one was mine that kind of backed up against Mr. Primetime's. I just really wanted to do a scape that had a lot of plants, and this was super fun. Got it from Badfish, the booth that was behind us. They were kind enough to allow us to acquire some of their plants, and they were beautiful Java ferns and Anubias, and I just wanted a lot of plants popping out of there. Super fun, especially with those beautiful rainbows. This booth for Space Coast, I wanted to take a shot of this because this is a beautiful example of an aquarium with a lot of plants and a lot of different plants. I find this style to be very difficult to do. Just for me, it's a tough style. I almost always am gravitated toward this style, and it reminds me of James Nature Aquatics, which you're going to see his tank here in a little bit, but he is excellent at scaping this nature style that just has a lot of different plants, so much to look at. It was just beautiful, and I just had to get some footage of this beauty. I had to include this one because it is an excellent representation of a tank that actually has all three elements very nicely showcased: the rock, driftwood, and plants. Now for my favorite category, and a lot of these that you've already seen fit inside of this. That's why this Aquashella was pretty mind-blowing for me. Out-of-the-box aquariums like this one. Yes, this was the booth that I was talking to Jeff. I saw it and I literally had to excuse myself. I said, Jeff, I have to go. I'm going to be back in a little while. I had to absorb it elsewhere because it was so cool. Love it. I love everything that just, it was just so amazing. And the little dried leaves that are hanging off, they're actually real. And until I looked at this footage, I did not realize that it spells out Awaza. Did anybody see that at the show? If you were there, did you see that? I didn't until looking at the footage. What a dummy. But I was so mind blown with everything about this. Love the beautiful guppies. Now, if you consider yourself creative, if you like things that are out of the box like this, you could certainly look at this tank and say, there is no way that I could do anything like that. I know there's no way that I could do something like that, but I can do my own, and it may turn out completely different, and that's totally fine. What totally blew me away with this tank was that he is a real, legit aquascaper. He's one of the best in the world. Really proud to know him and be able to talk to him sometimes at Aquashellas, and it's just so crazy that he, being a real, quote-unquote, aquascaper, would do something like this. It gives people like me hope that the creative world and the real, quote-unquote, aquascaping world can live together and display awesome things like this at an Aquashella. Totally cool that we don't have to live apart. It's kind of funny. This was his tank from a couple of years ago. I should have seen that he would just keep trying to top himself, and I should have been prepared. But I just love it, and anything that gives kind of a context to an aquarium. Like I say, you don't go out in nature and just see a glass box of water. I absolutely love. This was another one from a year or two ago. There was a little figure that was there, a little person, that I forgot. He had already taken it off and just started dismantling. I forgot it. But this one has a little bunny in it from the Awaza booth, and it reminded me of my one a couple years ago. So it just goes to show you don't have to have a lot of water. You don't have to have a lot of supplies. You can just make up your own. You can be inspired by what other people do, even if they are a famous aquascaper. Don't be frustrated, and you can bring in seasons. I love to bring in seasons. There's so much inspiration. So don't get frustrated. Just be inspired and see what you can come up with. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.